Okay. Let's wait for people to start showing up. Okay. Wait for people to start showing up. Oh, that's me. Go ahead and mute that. Okay, I just sent out the link. Let's see if anybody shows up.
There might not be a lot of people just because it's a different time of day.
Yeah.
Most of us are vampires.
That's very true.
At least Dominic's here.
Oh, okay, cool.
And you might want to explain why your keyboard is so loud as well.
Right. It's a mechanical keyboard. It's not like your typical rubber domes that a lot of people typically use. So it's a little more clicky and clack. But I'll hold it up so you can see what I'm talking about. That's it. So it's, yeah, a little more clicky and clacky. Hey, Eric.
How's it going?
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Good.
So I'll be muting myself in and out throughout just so we don't get too much background noise from my house.
Got it.
I've got a house where people are awake, so it's a little different.
Got it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I think maybe start at the beginning.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Okay. Let's start with just something basic. A lot of people already have an understanding of how to use a computer, but a lot of people don't understand what actually goes into it. Well, this is basically I guess you could say the heart of a system. This is a motherboard, and this is what your RAM plugs into and your processor, and you plug all your drives into this, and basically this is where it all starts. So this is an older board. This is a 990FX chipset for an older AMD series processor. Old FX series processor, 2 sticks of RAM. You plug your graphics cards into one of these. These ports here are for storage, your hard drives. This one's kind of interesting because it also has an M.2 slot for higher speed storage. Theoretical bandwidth, I think, is somewhere around 32 gigs a second, which is pretty damn fast. But like I said, those are just theoretical speeds. I don't know. Eric, do you have any questions yourself?
I don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay.
I'm just learning.
What kind of system are you currently running?
I'm currently running a laptop.
Okay. And how's that working out for you?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Okay. You don't play games or anything on it? That's mainly for a console? You mainly have consoles?
I do mainly have consoles.
Okay.
But excuse me, sorry. I just ate some apples a little bit ago. Sorry. But I am going to play, I'm actually going to play my First PC game in October.
Okay, and what game is that?
South Park: The Fractured Butthole.
Okay.
I also wanted to mention that consoles are actually computers.
Yes.
So you can they just have a different operating system.
Right. And they're usually, when a console gets released, it's usually released with slightly older hardware. So they're not the most current tech, but for what they do, they're actually pretty damn good. You don't really need a whole lot of horsepower to drive kinds of games that consoles run. They kind of pare them down a little bit, so you're not trying to run ridiculous resolutions at crazy frame rates or anything. I've had consoles before myself, but I gravitated toward the PC simply because I do more with my PC. I do video editing and that kind of stuff now and then, and you kind of need some horsepower for that. I've got a laptop also, but the thing honestly is kind of a PC. It's running an older i3 processor, and it's really not very fast.
So I know I understand it, but for people who aren't, so explain the difference between just the CPUs right now, the two companies, and like people might not know what an i3 means.
Right. Okay. Your processors, you have two basic companies, AMD and Intel, and they've been competing for going on about 20 years now. Intel has a naming scheme that starts with their i7. Their i7 is basically their top of the line enthusiast grade processor. And then it works down to i5. i5 is kind of middle of the road, and then i3 is kind of your entry level. And i3 is typically a dual core processor. Sometimes they'll even be hyper threaded. And then the i5s will have more cores, and then the i7s will have the most. I think that they're actually going to be releasing, no, they have released, they've released their i9 now. So it's a completely different SKU that they've added in, and it's called their high-end desktop platform. And it competes with AMD's Threadripper line, which is AMD's answer to Intel's high-end desktop platform. And the real difference really comes down to what you want to do with it. Price is going to be usually a little less with AMD, and right now you get a little more also with AMD, which is kind of nice. On the regular, desktop side of the spectrum, you have the Ryzen 7, you have the Ryzen 5, and the Ryzen 3, and they basically fit right in with Intel's i7, i5, and i3. So, I mean, if you understand the 7, 5, and 3 scheme, that's what they compete directly with, and it's the same thing. So
right.
it's
okay, say I want a computer for just general stuff like surfing the web, watching videos. What would you recommend for a CPU on the Intel side?
For the Intel side, I would recommend either an i3 or an i5. I would slightly go more with an i5 simply because you don't know if you're going to want to do more with it later. And pricing right now for the i5 is pretty good. They're really trying to compete with AMD right now in their Ryzen 5 series. So anything in the 3 and 5 series, I would, like I said, I would tend to look more toward the 5 simply because you may want the extra horsepower later on. In terms of the chipsets, which is what you base your motherboard on, you want to make sure that your chipset matches the processor that you're looking to get, because if it doesn't, it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to plug the processor in just any motherboard. You've got to make sure that the chipsets match. With Intel, their naming scheme is kind of confusing, to be honest. You've got to really look at not just the socket for your processor, you've really got to look at the chipset also.
Can you show people the socket on the motherboard?
Yeah. So for the AMD side, they're pretty much the same, but this is your socket. Okay, this is if you remove the processor, under it is the socket. I'll do that. So that's your socket, okay? And that's what your processor plugs into. So you want to make sure that that socket is compatible with your processor. That's basically it. And that the chipset will also support your processor. Like I said, Intel's kind of confusing, but I mean, if you do your research, you can figure out which processor plugs into which chipset and motherboard. If you're just browsing the web and just doing basic types of things like watching YouTube videos, streaming Netflix, that kind of stuff, you really don't need anything more than an i3 or Ryzen 3, because you're not really doing a whole lot with it. You're just doing really basic over the internet type of stuff. If you want to get into more processor oriented type of stuff where you need more horsepower, things like video editing, things like 3D modeling and rendering, then you want to look at more like an i5, higher end i5. The 1600X on the Ryzen side is an awesome processor for that kind of stuff, and the Ryzen 7 as well. And just try to find something that fits your price range. That's what you want to start with. Know how much your budget's going to be, and just start selecting the components from there, because you're going to be limited by your budget to begin with.
Now, one thing I think people can get confused about is physical cores and logical cores.
Yes.
And like sometimes an i5 may have 4 physical cores. Sometimes an i5 might have 2 physical cores and 2 logical cores. Maybe explain that.
Right. Your physical cores are for the most part going to be what you want to base your purchase on. Your logical cores just mean that what the processor does is it's able to split an instruction set. So it acts as 2 rather than just 1. But for how am I going to put this? For just regular stuff, you don't want to pay too much attention to that. Now, if you're going down toward the lower end, if you're looking at like an i3 and it says it's 2 cores and 2 physical cores and 2 logical cores, I would tend to go more with something that at least has 4 physical cores. Your physical cores are where your power is going to come from. Okay, so if it just has 2, you're probably going to be pretty limited with it.
And I want to add that so logical cores doesn't really hamper performance all too much, but like software programs can't make use of it until it's programmed to use that type of instructions. So
yeah, until the program or the application that you're using can recognize those logical cores, it's not going to use them. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So that's why I'm saying what you want to go for is something that has more physical cores as opposed to logical cores, because that's where your horsepower is going to come from, because you don't have to worry then if the application you're using is written for your extra logical cores.
Yeah, because some people will see an i3 with 4 cores and an i5 with 4 cores, and the i3 is cheaper for like $60. They'll be like, man, that's a deal. So,
and it's really not, because it's too physical and too logical, and you're going to run into issues. You're particularly if you're doing anything that's CPU intensive.
All right. So how important is the CPU for gaming? I think some people might be gamers.
Okay. If you look at a number of tech channels, I recommend some good ones are Hardware Canucks. What else? hardware unbox. You know, these guys talk about the fact that your processor really does not come into play very much when it comes to gaming. You're basically going to want to look at your graphics card. That's going to be handling the real performance there for driving your games. So the more powerful video card you can purchase, the better your games are generally going to run.
The only exception to that sometimes is physics or compute-related games.
Right.
And they can take up a lot of your CPU processing. What I would recommend for that is anything for an i5 4 physical cores will last a long time for games.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you really want, if you are gaming, you want something that has at least 4 physical cores, because that's going to help to push those pixels for that game, and do a lot of the background stuff, because that's what the processor does during gaming. Is it doesn't really handle the stuff that you're seeing on the screen. It's handling more of the stuff that's going on in the background, like the AI, for instance. If you're up against AI-driven opponents, that's what the processor is handling. That's got nothing to do with your graphics card. So you do want to make sure that you have a processor that at least has 4 good physical cores to handle that.
I think a lot of people also focus on upgrading memory whenever they feel like their system is slow. So maybe address that.
For gaming, I would recommend at the bare minimum 8 gigs of RAM, and that's just to keep things kind of running smoothly. As time progresses, we found that games use more and more physical memory. I run 16 in my own system just because, you know, it's kind of future proofing for me, so I don't have to worry about it later on. And I also do some video editing and stuff like that, and it does depend on memory. So if you're just gaming though, 8 gigs is fine. But if you're looking to kind of future proof yourself, go with 16. Another thing is your monitor, and a lot of people don't really think too much about that when they're looking to buy a system. If you're getting a monitor with a very high refresh rate, you're going to need a good graphics card to push that. Anything over 100 hertz is going to require a good graphics card. The average frame rate that you'll find on most monitors is about 60, but you're
that way I know what I'm doing. I'm putting it straight double.
Okay. Anyone know where that's coming from?
Eric?
Is that you, Eric?
Oh, my bad.
Okay. Yeah, like I was saying, a lot of people don't think about the monitors, but if you're getting a high-end monitor, you're going to need a good graphics card to push it, because it's going to be choppy. You're going to get a lot of lag, and it's just going to look terrible. So a good gaming monitor is going to be around the 144 hertz refresh rate, and that's roughly 140 some odd frames per second that it's going to be able to handle. And you're going to want a good graphics card to push that.
Yeah.
While
we're here, so what monitor do you have, and what graphics card do you have?
I've got it's a BenQ 27-inch. It's just a 1080p and runs at 60 hertz, and that's really all I need is a single monitor for this. It's a good size. It's, you know, I sit close enough to it, but not too close, and it handles my games fine. And I'm running a 980 Ti graphics card from EVGA. It's their classified version, so it comes overclocked out of the box. It runs, I've benchmarked it, it runs almost as good, not quite, but almost as good as a 1080, as a GeForce GTX 1080, which is pretty damn good. And it drives my games fine. I don't have any issues with it. I can play anything on the market without any issues. at pretty much maxed out settings. One other thing in terms of your monitor is whether or not it's 4K capable. If you're running a 4K monitor, that's another reason you need a good graphics card, and particularly one that has a lot of onboard memory. GPU memory is very important for your higher resolution monitors, because if you don't have that graphical memory, it's not going to handle the picture very well, and it's going to stutter, and it's going to look bad. So
another thing. So do you have an IPS panel or a TN panel? And you want to explain some of the panel types that they
unfortunately, I don't really know a whole lot. I've looked into it, but I don't really know a whole hell of a lot about it, unfortunately. I believe mine is a TN, and from my understanding, the TN panels tend to be, how can I put it? They tend to be better in terms of picture quality, but they tend to be, if I'm not mistaken, they tend to be a little slower in terms of their refresh rate.
It's the opposite.
Or is it the opposite?
Yeah.
Okay.
So TN panels people usually prefer for gaming because they're cheaper. They can get higher frequencies or refresh rates, and then the thing is, like if you do like a color spectrum test on it, it'll have like a color accuracy of anywhere from like 88% to like 94%. And then with an IPS panel, you can get up to pretty much 100%.
100%, yeah, that's right.
RGB, sRGB.
This is definitely a TN panel.
Yeah. The downside, so you get deeper blacks and all that for IPS. The downside is they're a lot more expensive, and they typically don't have higher refresh rates. So if you want to get, say, a 144 hertz IPS panel, you're like a 27-inch. You're looking like a 2560 by 1440. You're thinking about $500, I think $600. Now, if you get a TN equivalent, it's more going to be more like 200, 250.
Right.
And then as far as differences between G-Sync and is for more NVIDIA, you'll see a lot of monitors. So if you have a NVIDIA graphics card, go for a G-Sync monitor. Don't go for the do you remember
FreeSync
FreeSync one. FreeSync's for AMD. Yeah. So if you have a FreeSync monitor and have a NVIDIA graphics card, you're not going to be able to utilize the benefits of that monitor.
Yeah, exactly. Now the thing is too is the G-Sync monitors are quite a bit more expensive right now. So if you're looking at something that's more budget oriented, get an AMD graphics card and a FreeSync monitor. There is this issue though right now with crypto mining, and it's making some of the mid-range graphics card very hard to find, and they're rather overpriced right now. Right now is really, to be honest with you, it's not a good time to be building a basic gaming machine. The graphics cards are just really hard to find, and if you do find them, they're really overpriced right now. Until this crypto mining trend slows down or ends, it's going to be pretty tough. And the thing is too is AMD just released a very new graphics card called Vega, and they had to the retailers jacked up the prices ridiculously just shortly after they were released because of the crypto mining issue. They're all being bought up, and it's really driving up the prices and making them hard to find.
Sorry, I kind of want to mute. So when we're talking about cryptocurrency mining, to solve the, I guess, algorithms to get, maybe we could go in more depth, but basically it's using floating point 64 cores to do all that. And now what you'll see in a lot of gaming cards is that they're going to cut those either in half or in fourths or in eighths or even like 16ths, so you can't really mine for them very efficiently.
Right.
But when you have professional graphics cards, they typically don't cut them. But the thing about that is those professional graphics cards, are anywhere from $500-600 to like $2,000 to $5,000.
Yeah, they're very expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Pro Series cards from either AMD or NVIDIA are very expensive. And the thing is, too, is people look at the price and they go, well, what are you paying for? What you're really paying for is the software, because the back-end software to get to do some of the grunt work that the GPUs are used for is very expensive.
All right. So for people who are wanting to get their own computer, they may see a computer that they can afford that might be, say, $500. It comes with a keyboard and monitor and their tower. Now, if you're going to build one yourself for that same amount, how much better would it be?
Quite a lot better, honestly, particularly when you're looking at the lower end, anywhere between $500 to say $800. If you go into a box store like Best Buy and look at their desktop systems, anywhere from, like I said, $500 to $800, you will end up saving quite a bit of money if you were to build that exact same system on your own. Because the thing is that for those systems, they really inflate the prices. That's number one. Number two, they tend to use really lower end components, and it's really not worth it. I had a buddy of mine about 2 years ago. I kept telling him I was going to be able to build a system for him, and he decided he was just going to go ahead and build or buy one on his own, and it turned out to be a piece of junk. The power supply shorted out after about 4 months. They put in a much lower end power supply, much lower wattage than what the system really needed, and it basically killed the system. So you really are getting ripped off, particularly at the middle end of the spectrum when you go into a box store. Some of the higher end systems, what I found interesting though is if you're looking at something along the lines of maybe 14 to 1800 or even higher, those tend to actually be pretty well priced. You're not going to find too many that you'll save a whole lot of money on if you end up building it yourself. And I think the reason for that is that those don't sell very much anyway, so they're not trying to make a whole lot of money off of those. It's the middle end that people really get screwed, unfortunately.
Yep. All right.
Anybody have any questions in the chat?
Good. If I see some, I'll stop and ask questions.
What do you got, Eric?
Oh, I pulled this out of my I pulled this out of my closet earlier when I wasn't. But this is like my laptop.
Oh yeah, okay, that's a nice one.
Yeah,
that's a very nice laptop.
Yeah,
okay.
I pretty much when I pretty much sold my stuff back in I think it was yeah, I have almost had this for, it'll be December will be the first year having it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I sold a bunch of stuff so I can get it.
So
gotcha. Now, what do you think of it?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Asus is pretty good for
they
laptops.
are good.
Now, one of the things that I see a lot, and I keep warning people, especially with laptops. Now, when you purchase online or at a store, they're going to ask you if you want to upgrade your memory, if you want to upgrade your hard drive. Don't, because they make it 2 to 3 times more expensive upgrading it from them than if you just bought it on your own and you installed it on your own. And to install it on your own, even for a laptop, is very, very easy. All you need is a screwdriver, plop it out, put it back in. They make upgrading memory very easy. Your disk drives, whether it's a hard disk drive or a SSD, they make it really easy to update as well. So those two things, don't upgrade them at the store, don't upgrade them online. You can buy those parts separately, and it'll be 3 times as cheap.
Yeah, you're much better off doing that yourself. Now, the one thing you want to watch out for is there are some laptops out there, particularly on the Apple side, where all that stuff is soldered, which is honestly, it's insane. Why would you do that? So you can't upgrade that stuff on your own, and you have to go through them to get it done. But what Eric has, for instance, yeah, you want to do that on your own. You know, pop out the bottom panel and just install it yourself.
Cool.
Yeah. What GPU did that come with, Eric?
Excuse me?
What graphics card did it come with?
Oh, the graphics card? It came with a NVIDIA GeForce GTX 980M.
Okay. Yeah, that's fairly powerful.
And the Intel Inside Core, it's an i7.
i7. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's not bad.
And it has NVIDIA G-Sync.
Yeah, the G-Sync monitor, nice.
I really like it a lot.
Yeah, that's a good laptop. I'm guessing 2,800 roughly?
Oh, you'll be surprised at the price.
Really?
Ready? 1,100.
No shit.
Newegg.
How'd you manage that?
I got very lucky.
That's an excellent price.
Yeah, usually those would run in like 1,600. It's pretty good.
Yeah, that's the lower end of those would run that. I mean, if you throw any extra memory or a larger solid state drive on it, you're talking over 2,000. That's an excellent deal, Eric. Wow.
Is that something like from Black Friday or something?
Oh no, this was after Black Friday.
Oh, okay.
Oh wow. Okay.
Because I was looking for laptops in the first place, then I just got super lucky.
Yeah.
I was like, It was my first laptop like in a long time. So I had to make a really, really good decision.
Gotcha.
And I just
awesome.
came up with this.
Was that a Best Buy or some other
Online?
Newegg.
Oh, it was online.
Newegg.com.
Newegg, yeah. Every now and then, Newegg will throw out some really crazy deals. I love shopping on Newegg.
So another thing that when you buy directly from a store, as far as just like a desktop, not a laptop,
right?
Instead, like you'll get a not so good power supply. You also get a not so good CPU cooler.
Yeah.
And also a lot of the fans in the tower itself will be stock, and usually it could be loud. So some things, like if you have heat problems as far as like a hot CPU, you can get a better CPU cooler. And also the fans, like expensive fans. I mean, you're talking about one 120 millimeter fan that costs up to like $20. It's pricey, but it can cool your system and be silent. If you want, some people have a computer where it just kind of sounds like an airplane taking off.
Yeah.
So a lot of those store-bought ones aren't going to have it, so it's loud, blows a lot of air, but it keeps it from being that breaking your PC, because heat is a major problem with computers.
Oh yeah, heat is the biggest problem with computers. I'm going to share my screen here for a second and show you a couple of means that I went about killing heat. Hold on a second. So this was a water-cooled, a completely water-cooled system I built about 4 years ago.
Whoa.
Everything was water-cooled, the processor, the motherboard, and the GPU. I had 3 radiators in it, one in the top, one in the back, and one in the bottom, and it kept everything. I don't think anything got over 40 degrees Celsius, no matter what I was doing. It was pretty badass.
And you're not going to get much heat from a 680 either.
No, yeah, true. It was also when I was working with for SwiftTech at the time, so I got a lot of that stuff really, really cheap. They had a really good employee system.
Nice. I wish I knew you back then, Bram. I have so much stuff, and
yeah.
But usually I get a lot of so do you recommend to anybody hardware forums in places like that?
Yes. The one that I frequent the most is overclock.net. You can find, I mean, if you do a search, you can find anything on just about any piece of hardware you currently have, and they'll have some thread dedicated to it. I belong to all the threads that involve my motherboard, my processor, and my GPU, and they'll let you know when to expect a new BIOS update or anything like that, because they're directly involved with the manufacturers. It's a really good forum.
I use that too. What's your name on it? In case I find you. Is this Bram SLI?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll look for that. So overclock.net, there's a lot of people. One I would recommend is overclockers.club.com. It's very small, but very, very helpful people, moderators, and person who owns it. They're very, very knowledgeable, and they'll take time to answer your questions, because there's not a lot of people that go through there like overclock.net. And overclock.net is good for buying and selling.
It is too. Yeah, I've done that on there too. Yeah.
And there's some good people to buy from, and you could tell because they have like seller rating or buyer rating. And they another place is called Hard Forum.
Hard Forum is good too.
A lot of people who go on overclock.net also go on Hard Forum, and they're also a good place where you can buy and sell. And they don't have their own seller rating, but most of those people who are there will have an overclock.net account that has one, and they also have a heatware. So you'll see what's your heatware, and that's basically just an online site where people just give each other ratings from people in that hardware community.
Right. So I'm also going to show a couple of other systems I've built over the years. Hold on a second. So this is one that I put together for SwiftTech. It was just before a tech show that we had in Las Vegas, and they needed a really high-end system to show off some of our new water blocks and stuff, and that was a lot of fun to build. So there was that one, and another one was, this one was actually put together for a client while I was working for SwiftTech. He actually approached us and said that he needed somebody to put together something that he was using for school what was he into? I think he was into really high-end crypto type of stuff. So code breaking and that kind of stuff. So he needed something with a lot of horsepower that stayed cool. So I built that for him. So yeah, it can be a lot of fun. It's interesting too, the way you come across different issues. With that last build, for instance, we had a problem with his graphics cards. If they went under, I think it was 32 degrees Celsius, the system wouldn't boot. It refused to boot if the graphics cards were too cold. It didn't make any sense. It turned out it was a setting in the BIOS for the GPUs that we just had to flip. I think it was registering them as being cooled on liquid nitrogen.
Yeah.
So we had to set the liquid nitrogen setting for the graphics cards to get the system to boot. It was really weird. I hadn't seen that before.
Yeah. You'll experience a lot of that. And then I think what the reason, like, so Bram, I don't know whether I call you Bram or Bryan. So
Doesn't matter.
You like to play around with overclocking. So people with good cooling,
Yes.
you'll usually see people overclocking. And
Right.
can you explain to people what that means and what that does?
Yeah. Basically, when you buy particularly your processor, okay, it's going to come at a rated speed. Mine, for instance, comes at a rated speed of 3 gigahertz. That's across all 8 cores and all 16 logical processors. So what you can do is if you have a good motherboard, you have good cooling, and you've got a good case that will allow you to dissipate that heat quickly, you can overclock it. And to do that, you have to go into your BIOS settings. And basically, it's a lot of playing around with the voltages and the multiplier. The multiplier is what tells the processor what speed to run at. So what I had to do is I had to set my multiplier from 30, which told it to run at 3,000 megahertz, at 3 gigahertz. I had to tell it to run at 38 instead of 30, and that jumped it to 3.8 gigahertz. And then I just had to mess around with my voltages to get that speed stable. So, and there are a number of different programs that you can use to check stability. The one that I use is Prime 95, because what Prime 95 will do is it will tax your CPU to its absolute limit, and you just let that run for at least a good 5 or 6 hours. And if you don't see any crashing or any stuttering in the program, you know that your overclock is stable.
The older versions, I could do it for 15 minutes, and I don't know if I'm stable or not. Yeah. But now it's more like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But basically, pick a number. Usually, 30 minutes is usually fine. The longer you do it, the more potential you'll find. And one of the things I ask people when they want a new computer, the computer's slow, is like how much money they want to spend. Oh, I could spend maybe about $200. That's not a lot to spend on, especially what they do. They don't game. Yeah. They just do a lot of work like on Excel, whatever, and it's so they have 16 gigs of memory. I go, that's kind of a good amount. I don't think you need more. You don't do video editing. So what it is their CPU is just the stock, and it's a good one. Say it's like an i7 2600K or something like that. And that's a really fast and efficient CPU. The thing is, so if you spend $200 on for $200, you're gonna need a new CPU. You're gonna need a new motherboard if you want a faster CPU. So instead of doing that, is you invest in a good CPU cooler, which some of the good ones, like Air ones, I would recommend are Noctua. But there's so many now these days. But that's usually around $60. You do that, and then maybe add some case fans to circulate cooler air through your tower, and then you overclock it. So like a 2600K, I think is default speed at what, like 3.6 gigahertz.
That sounds right. Yeah.
And then, but when you overclock it with the air cooler, you can get it to 4.6 gigahertz, no problem. I think some of them can even hit 4.8 without a problem. At least the 2700Ks could. Yeah. But I mean, that right there is a big bump.
Yeah.
Because that's per core is you're getting that speed. So it's basically what is it, like a 25% bump increase in speed, and $200 for a CPU and motherboard is not going to cut it these days.
Yeah. And that bump in speed, you wouldn't think that it's that noticeable. It is. It's incredibly noticeable, particularly when you're doing anything that taxes the processor, you'll notice it. You'll notice how much snappier everything is, and just how much more smoothly everything runs. Just a little bit of an overclock can really make a big difference in performance. See, and the thing is too is that depending on the platform, memory speed is also very important. For instance, the new Ryzen platform, the new AMD platform, really depends on higher memory speed, because that's the speed that the bus runs at. So the higher your memory speed, the better your system is going to perform. For instance, when it was first released, a lot of people couldn't get their memory over 2600 megahertz because the motherboard BIOSes were really new, and they couldn't push the memory speed any further than that. And once they realized that you know, as the new BIOSes came out, and you could get higher memory speeds, they noticed how much faster their system was performing, even if the processor was still left at the same speed. They were still getting better performance because the bus speed for the system itself was faster, because that's what the bus speed depended on, was memory speed. So it's just it depends on the architecture, which was, you know, kind of neat to find out.
And I've done some stress testing on just getting frame rates for games for the graphics cards. But I noticed when you increased your CPU speeds, you would actually make your minimum frame rates faster. So when you play a game and you measure your performance, it's taking your minimum frame rate, your average, and your maximum frame rate, and then they also average it, so you get an average frame rate. So what I noticed is when you increase your, go ahead.
Kevin's got a question. He's asking about a thermal electric cooler. I'm guessing he's talking about something like a Peltier cooler. You know what's funny is SwiftTech, we had developed our own Peltier cooler about 8 years ago, and they were looking at bringing the thing to market. The problem is that with some of the newer architectures that were coming out that were really hot, their initial design just was not good enough to keep them cool, and the developmental cost of improving it it wasn't there. It just didn't make it. It wasn't a good market strategy. So so SwiftTech dropped the concept.
So a question I have for the Ryzen, I think I asked it, but I don't remember what the answer was. Are the CPUs the lids soldered, or are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, the lids are soldered. Yeah, all of the AMD chips, the lids are soldered, as opposed to Intel using thermal paste in between the processor and the heat.
And not too good paste. So
and not too good paste either. Yeah, which is really unfortunate.
So they started that on the i5, i7 3570K, 3770Ks.
The first ones, yeah, that had that, yeah.
So anything after those series of Intel chips, those are not soldered anymore.
Yeah, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how good your cooling is, you have to delid it. Now, I can show you, while you continue, I can show people what a delided CPU looks like.
Yeah, well, the idea is that you have your processor that sits, it's the low point, okay, and above it you've got your heat spreader that you're trying to cool, right, with your heat sink. And the problem is if that in between that chip and the heat spreader is just thermal paste rather than solder, you're not getting a very good contact. So what happens is your cooling solution has to be much better than it normally would be in order to keep that processor cool. Now with AMD, for instance, all of their processors are soldered in between the processor and the heat spreader. So that allows for a much better contact. So you don't have to worry about the overheating issue as much. So what Ebon is talking about is he's talking about taking that heat spreader, taking that lid off of the top of the chip, so that you can then add your own much higher end thermal interface material to keep that chip cooler. The problem is that it will void your warranty on that chip. So if you've got like a very expensive $800 to $1,000 processor, do you really want to take the risk of breaking that processor by removing the heat spreader or the lid from the top of it? And a lot of it does happen. You know, you'll pull the lid off and you'll find that part of the thermal paste was so well attached that it broke your processor, and now you're out all that money. It's really ridiculous that Intel decided to make that move back to a rather low end thermal interface material instead of solder. I really don't understand their rationale for that. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because they're actually gimping the performance of their own processors by doing that. So do you have any more questions there, Kevin? How about you, Eric? Anything to add?
I have nothing to add. I'm just here to learn too.
Hold on. Dark Electrohead. I need to get a cheap but decent pre-built game PC, just good enough to play 7 days to die on medium settings. Any recommendations from like Best Buy? Okay. Dark Electrohead. I'll be honest with you. That really is not going to be a good solution to buy a pre-built machine for what you're trying to do. I would look at building something yourself. You'll save money, and you'll end up with something that works better than what you could have just bought off the shelf. If you need recommendations on that, I'd be willing to help you pick out some parts for that.
So Dominic posted a link to his old website that like kind of shows you how a computer works.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I want to show you what a delidded CPU looks like. So this is the 3570K. This is with the lid. So that's usually soldered. If it's not, I delid them. So this is an old one. So basically you have to take it all apart. There'll be a lot of like stickiness, but yeah, I just removed that. So you've actually got the CPU here, and there's still some thermal paste on it that I didn't take away. I just didn't get around to it. So anyways, that's what it looks like. Some people actually have things where they put something around it so it's like level, and they just put the CPU cooler right on top of that. Otherwise, you would just put in some thermal compounds, some good ones like diamond IC or something like that, and you would just go ahead and put it on. You don't even have to glue it back together. I mean, you can if you want, but I just usually leave it as is, and then I put thermal compound on that between the CPU. And there's a lot, and thermal compound makes a difference too.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people have still use this stuff called what is it? Silver something or other. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Arctic Silver.
Yeah, Arctic Silver.
Yep.
And the thing is Arctic Silver's been around for about a good 15 years. And it really has, their formula for it hasn't changed much. There are much better thermal interfaces out now that do a much better job. Who is it? It's Noctua. Noctua makes one of...
Noctua. Yep, NH.
Yeah.
D1. I can't remember, but that's my go-to one, really. Yeah. I really like it.
They make one of the best. It's really good stuff, and it's not really all that expensive, and it's fairly easy to apply. You don't need much, and you drop the heatsink down onto it, tighten it down, and you're good to go.
Don't use that stock stuff that they give
Yeah,
to
don't
you.
ever, if you buy a heat sink that has pre-applied thermal paste, remove that crap and put something better on it, because that stuff is always horrible.
Yep.
It's never very
They'll
good
also
stuff.
dry out really fast, and you'd have to
Yep.
reapply it maybe 6 months to a year. It's not worth it.
No.
Hey, Bram.
Yeah.
I wanted to tell you, for the thermal electric coolers, it's
Right.
just functions on the thermal pile thing.
Mhm.
You can run in reverse how much heat it can draw. Its maximum thing that you can produce with it is a 70 degrees Celsius differential. So you can force a pretty substantial differential if you have the correct built module.
Right.
The amount of heat it can absorb off of something is proportional to the time and the current flowing through it.
Right.
Because it produces a current by the heat moving through it in one direction. Right. So to reverse that process, you have to produce a current in it. And the bad side of the current thing is you could have it generating heat itself. So you have to balance it out to where you can build, if you really put some thought into it, you could build one incredibly effective that would draw the heat out of stuff pretty well, but you'd have a bulky sized cooling system.
Right, and that's what SwiftTech, like I said, the company I work for, SwiftTech, they were looking at one, and they'd actually had a mock-up done.
Just being able to force down the temperature of a processor like that, like not just like cooling it, but force it below the cooling fluid temperature even.
Yeah.
That's I'd like to hear more of what you had to say there about it. What exactly were they doing?
Well, they had their own working version of one. They had designed their own. The problem is that the next generation of chips that came out were really hot, much hotter than they had designed this tech to deal with, and going back and redesigning it to deal with all this extra heat just did not seem to be a good market strategy for it.
Well, think about the chips that we have now, like the Ryzen thing. That's a 50-watt thermal dissipation for the smaller ones. And that's pretty good performance. I mean, you can draw that. I mean, when you pair that cooling technology with a chip that already has higher performance and a lower heat dissipation, you can probably get them, basically couple them together and get a really good performance out of it. Right,
but here's the issue. That's going to work great for Ryzen, but what about on the Intel side, particularly with their new HEDT processors?
Vapor compression heat pump. Basically, the bitch comes with a fridge heat pump next to it.
Yeah, it would have to. I mean, those things are ridiculously hot.
Here's another problem with that compared to water cooling.
That's inefficiency too. That heat generation.
Yes, it is.
With water cooling, you can actually also include within your loop the graphics cards and the CPU and certain parts of the motherboard as well, and memory these days.
Right. And if your computer is hot enough, you can use it for water heating for your house.
Yeah.
How big of a computer do you have? Add a couple servers. I'm going to heat my house.
So the thing with Peltier cooling is just the size of it. You can't cool all those components like a water cooling rig.
Yeah, you could. You could cool those because think of it like a heat sink. All right. If you can fit a heat sink there, you can fit a TEC there. All right. And it runs on similar power levels to what the fans run on and what the pumps run on. So it's compatible. Even the pre-made models are 12 volts and things like that run right now. I mean, I've got one of those little car ones, a 130 watt model, and that thing will produce a 25-degree differential, and I can probably get that to go even further if I insulate the shit out of the cold box.
Right, but the issue is, Kevin, is that the manufacturing differences between motherboards, between graphics cards, between all that stuff.
Yeah, but these things are produced in the millimeter range, like 70 to 70 millimeters. They're produced, like go to Tech Power, not Tech Power, but there's it's one of the markets you can actually buy them from, and they are produced almost the identical size of processors.
Right, I understand that, but finding something that's going to be like an all-in-one solution to cool everything, what I'm saying is that the manufacturing differences to make something that's going to be universal is going to be really difficult.
On the graphics card, it'd probably be you could because basically I've taken apart a graphics card. Most times it's just they use a big heat spreader plate, or sometimes they use heat pipes or vapor pipes that cool, or just use a heat sink on the components.
But that's just for the GPU itself. Right. But a lot of the problems with graphics card is also cooling the
VRMs.
VRMs.
Yeah.
And those blow. Sorry, your graphics card is done for.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. I think there's potential to use it.
Can't fit a heat sink.
Yeah, it can get there. It just, I mean, no one's really making products to do it. You'd have to make it all yourself, and stuff like that. And those are more for very, like, maybe the third episode of this.
If you're trying to build a hyper efficient cooling system.
Yeah, and also,
well, like, not even efficient. It would suck up a lot of power, but it would be hyper efficient it would be cooling the shit out of this damn thing. It's sucking heat out of it. It's not waiting for the heat to be dissipated.
Yeah, but it's also like what's the limitations? Like for graphics card, there is a limitation. It doesn't matter how cold it is. You can't overclock it to a certain point. It just unless you also mess with some of the power stuff. And the VRMs are going to get hot. So you're basically playing with fire if you want to game a super overclocked graphics card. Now on the CPU side, with water cooling, you can pretty much make sure that you can get to say 5 gigahertz and just go day to day with that. It's just a lot of power being used and not a lot at And then if you use like a Peltier cooler and say you get it to like it's running at 40C, even if it's at 5 gigahertz, maybe up to 5.5 gigahertz.
What are we looking for? Cooling efficiency or power efficiency?
There's always a balance. Like for example, I could probably run my CPU at 5 gigahertz instead of 4.6 gigahertz. But the thing is, the power draw.
On it. God, that'd be so funny. I'd want to see that actually done once, wouldn't you? Like a fridge-size heat pump on a computer like that, just to see how far can you push the thing.
Yeah. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is, you've got the extra power, whether you use it or not, but it's actually costing in electric bills, extra 200 watts, per hour if you're actually using your computer, the processing. So 200 watts per hour per day that it's on, it starts to add up. Yeah. And just for 400 megahertz difference, it's not worth it.
That's one of the reasons I keep mine at 3.8. I can push it. It will go to 3.95. I can't get any higher than that. But 3.8 is really all I need, and that's pretty efficient for that speed.
So there's always this balance, and it's nice having a super fast computer, but you don't need it's super fast all the time, and you don't need. I mean, it's almost cheaper in the end run just to get a stock maybe 10 core CPU, and then to like upgrade all the cooling for it and run it hot with more wattage over time. So it's just a balance, really. And power supply makes a big difference in efficiency as well. So if you get say bronze rated power supply where its efficiency is at 80% as compared to like a gold or platinum where the efficiency is at 94%. So if your computer is running at a basic 500 watts, I guess, per hour for 24 hours, let's say 10 hours a day, it'll save you a little bit. I mean, it just depends on how much you use your computer.
One good, efficient, passive cooling solution is, I said heat pipe, but that's not exact. I mean, it is a heat pipe, but it's a sealed heat pipe that you put a refrigerant in, all right? That way, when it produces heat, it turns into a gas and it draws off it, and it has an expansion bulb at the top to where it bleeds that heat off at a higher temperature. You know, that can also be a very effective way to passively cool a device.
Right, what you're talking about, they actually have those. It's a what are they called?
Called a heat pipe.
No, it's a
they use them for solar tubes. They use them for waste heat recovery. They also use them for refreezing stuff. They use them for a lot of things.
Yeah, I think Thermaltake came out with, it was years ago, came out with a case that had one of these things built into it. I mean, the thing was massive and just only covered the processor, but I mean, it would keep the processor down in the low, like teens Celsius wise, no matter what you did with it. It was, I mean, these things were pretty
because
powerful.
You have a gas that's forced in there under pressure, and then it turns into a liquid, and then when it gets heated, it boils. They were also really noisy and really expensive. What was noisy about it? I think, if I remember correctly, there was a motor involved with it, because you still have heat that gets pulled off, and that heat has to get cooled somehow. So you got fans or something, or have a liquid cooling. It has to get dissipated somehow, right? Yeah. Or you just have a giant thermal mass, something you can bleed that heat into. Like if you can go overkill with cooling solutions, like a 10-pound block of aluminum with grades cut into it, you can go overkill like hell. Right. But that's not really practical for a product, I guess. But if you want to have fun, you can sure do a lot of things. Yeah. One person, I think it was Dark Electrohead. He's looking at building something really cheap for around $440. I would highly suggest looking at the new Ryzen 3 1200 as your processor, and just get a fairly decent B350 motherboard, and you'll be good to go. That is a good platform to start with. That right there, I mean, just the processor and the motherboard's about 150, and then you'll have enough for some memory, about, I'd say no more than 8 gigs. Throw an 8 gig stick of memory on there, and a fairly decent power supply, and you're good to go.
Dark Electrohead is still looking for pre-built. One of the things also people, we don't recommend it.
No, really don't.
If at the least, get a bare bones system and just add the peripherals after that. So a bare bones consists of typically a motherboard, CPU, and memory, pretty much. And a case. And a power supply.
I highly recommend not getting one with the power supply.
Don't get the power supply with the bare bones. So the bare bones, it has everything set up on your desktop. All you have to do is add a power supply, add a graphics card, and add disk drives, and you're pretty much done. Those are 3 things that you need to do, and that's a really good introduction, I think, for building your own.
Newegg has some deals on those kinds of bare bones systems. I highly suggest you take a look and see if you can find something there that fits in your budget, that you just need to add a power supply to, because that'll take care of you. Now, if you're willing to wait a little longer, AMD is getting very, very ready to drop their new APU Ryzen-based processors. That's a processor and graphics chip in one. When those drop, they're going to be very cost effective, and they'll do a lot of the stuff that it sounds like you're needing to do. You're just going to have to wait a little bit. I think they're looking at January timeframe for releasing those, and I think that'll be exactly what you're looking for. You drop it into a motherboard. The motherboard's already going to have your video outputs. You plug it into your monitor, and you're good to go. It's going to be a very cost-efficient way of getting a very basic system up and running.
So there's so many things to explore with PC and tech. I think this was kind of a good starting point. I think people get more questions as they get more into this, and there is a good amount of people on, so that's a good thing. So, like one of the things is Jenny Lynn is looking for either deciding whether to get desktop or laptop, and I think she games. Now, one of the things that I was playing around with is using risers on a laptop to connect to a laptop PCIe and connect it to an external graphics card, a discrete graphics card. So you can game wherever you want. You just bring your graphics card with you, and you get the high-powered graphics card. There are limitations to that because for laptops, it's basically PCIe 1. Maybe you might be able to get a PCIe X4 in there, so there is a little bit bottleneck. But also, I think NVIDIA, someone was trying to do something like that. I'm not sure if they've gotten around to it. I don't think there was a lot of like people excited about it. Plus, I think it was pretty expensive when you do it yourself. If you do it yourself, it can be like $15.
You also have companies like Razer and Alienware that have external GPU boxes that plug into some of their laptops. So basically, you get a desktop powered graphics card set up externally that you plug into, and it's not all of their laptops, unfortunately. You have to get one that's compatible with it, but you get. Honestly, it doesn't scale very well. It really, unfortunately, it doesn't because of the interface. It does not scale very well. But if you get kind of a mid-range GPU, say something like a 1060 or even like a 480 on the AMD side, a 480 GPU, it's going to do what you need it to do. It's not a bad solution.
And there's a balance, right? So if you get say a laptop that has a 1080 as a GPU, it's going to cost $2,000. You get a laptop that has everything but like the worst, or has its like our own internal GPU. Say it's like $600, right? So there's a $1,200 difference. Except you get that box, say it costs $80, and you get a graphics card like Bram's suggesting that's like say in the $300 range. So you're spending $380. You're still saving $600, $700. The only thing is you're carrying around this extra box of graphics card. So, and I don't think a lot of people game outside their home very much. I mean, on occasion, you're going to a hotel or whatever, you're staying at a hotel, you might play some games or something like that while everyone's sleeping. But basically, you don't carry your laptop and game somewhere else very much. And if you do, a backpack, you're carrying an extra battery pack. You're carrying maybe your own keyboard, mouse, and mouse pad. You're carrying extra your power adapter. So you're usually carrying around stuff. So if you don't think an extra power box and a graphics card is going to be a big hindrance, then that's also another way to go. And I think it's cool that they've actually started doing that.
Yeah, I think it's neat. And what they were waiting for and had been waiting for, because I remember talking to who was it? I think I was talking to Alienware. This was when I was in the Navy. I was looking at getting an Alienware laptop. They were saying that the issue they were running into was the interface. They just didn't have a fast enough interface to push that kind of horsepower through to make an external GPU a viable solution. But with Thunderbolt, it's there. I mean, they can do it. It's. I mean, like I said, again, it doesn't scale perfectly, but it's definitely doable. It's not a horrible solution.
Yeah. All right. Final words. Anyone has a final question for Bram? Let's see. I think what you can do is try to make like a questions list. Where people can access like a Excel spreadsheet or something. And just link it every night or on your description box so people can ask questions.
I'll do that.
All right. Well.
Okay. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Movie night, and anything goes later tonight, I think.
Yep.
So
Cool.
we'll see everyone there.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Love
Bryan.
y'all. Have a good one. You guys take care. See, this was a lot of fun.
This was fun.
All right. You guys take care. Love y'all. Have a good one. And I'll see you guys later.
All right.
Yep. See you guys soon.
Take care.